Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first in a series of 10 webinars produced by IFO on the subject of forestry solutions. My name is Sweetman, and I'm the chairman of IFO. We're a network of forest producer groups formed just a year ago to support individual producer groups throughout the country. We currently have 9 constituent member groups stretching from Donegal in the northwest to Wexford in the southeast. It's important to set the context, I think, of these webinars. We're all aware, I think, that the forest industry in Ireland is in crisis. However, what we are doing here tonight is looking at forestry solutions. So we will be taking a positive, or we'll hope to be giving a positive message about forestry in this series of webinars. The webinars are organised by the IFO with the help of the Society of Irish Foresters, and they're supported by the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and the Marine. I should point out that the webinars are being recorded and they will be available on the IFO website subsequently. So this evening's first webinar, we take a look at the forest owner groups in the UK, France and Ireland. Our speakers will tell you about how their groups operate, how they support their members, and talk about the general situation with producer groups in their individual countries. I'm delighted to welcome tonight's speakers. They are Amanda Calvert of Smallwoods UK, Damien Francois of Forets et Bois d'Est, and Liam Kelly of Teagasc. There will be a Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. You will see the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen where you can type in any questions you may have for the speakers, and they will either answer them individually or we might take them, time permitting, at the end of the webinar. Our first speaker tonight is Amanda Calvert. She is the Woodland Management and Membership Officer with Smallwoods UK. Smallwoods are a UK organisation for woodland owners, workers, supporters and social foresters. Amanda has been working in the environment sector for at least 30 years. She has worked for the Smallwoods Association since 2014 and worked as a project officer for the European Simwood project, which aimed to increase the movement of wood from forests and woodlands in Europe. And it is through that project that we connected with Amanda. So I'd now ask Amanda to take it away, as they say, and maybe share your screen. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicholas. Okay, has that come up okay?
Yes, that's fine, Amanda.
Great. Okay, yes, so we're a UK-wide organisation and I'm actually based in Scotland, in the Highlands, at the foot of the Cairngorms. We're a charity that was established in the year 2000. Oh, excuse me. And we're a membership organisation of about 2,300 members. We're UK-wide and we've got a few international members as well. It's mainly made up with small woodland owners, but we do also have community woodlands that are in England, and craft and coppice workers, and some folk that just have a general interest in woodlands. So what do? We provide knowledge exchange, training courses, member events, we manage projects, we have apprentices, we organise volunteers and manage volunteers, we carry out research, and we're also just venturing now into group schemes, some of which I'll mention later on in the presentation. So what do we do for our members? We operate an inquiry line where members can ask us anything they want about their woodland management, products, supply chain, absolutely anything they need to ask. And we will answer them by email with just a general response. We also have online woodland surgeries. So if a member wants a little bit more support and advice, we run woodland surgeries, and we quite often have a sequence of them with a member, and we can support them with all sorts of things from just simple questions about plant health all the way through to supporting them to write a management plan. We provide woodland advisor visits, so I've got a number of woodland advisors and regional coordinators based across the UK, and they can go out and actually talk to woodland owners in their woodlands. We've been doing a lot of those remotely where we can over the last 18 months, but we've started to go back outside with the folks now as well. We also offer a mentorship programme where we've got woodland owners can have a mentor to help them with their woodland management. We give them a discount on training courses. So we run a range of training courses that are available for members and non-members, and members get a 20% discount on those. We provide a newsletter, a magazine and a handbook. We've got a members area on a website that's got a vast array of resources and links to films and the online version of the handbook. And we also host woodland member visits where we can have lots of networking and members can talk about different issues in their woodlands. And we also provide them with an opportunity to be part of some of our projects. So from the point of view of training, we often think from woodland management. We do sustainable woodland management course, introduction to woodland management, timber measuring, a few of those, greenwood craft courses, heritage craft courses, social forestry, first aid and practical woodland skills from chainsaw courses all the way through to other practical skills. And we're just starting next year with some master craftsman courses, and we do these as accredited or non-accredited courses. And they're hosted generally from the Greenwood Centre, but again, next year we're starting to increase the areas that we run these from, starting with Scotland. We're running some from Cashel at Long Lomond side next spring. Projects, we've got a number of projects that we're engaged with. We've got a Woodland Biodiversity Project, Health and Wellbeing Project, £1.5 million project in Wales. Lost Woods, which is looking at ancient woodlands and management of those. Biochar production and from diseased ash, FSC Ecosystem Services. Elms, which is the environmental land management trials. Build a Bench, which is a social forestry project, and Women in the Woods, which is another social forestry project. So I thought I'd just share with you a couple of the projects and how we work with these. So we obtained funding from the Forestry Commission Innovation funding source this October. And what we're doing is we're looking at bringing woodlands into management and then becoming FSC certified and then FSC Ecosystem Services certified, so that we can support members in obtaining funding through from corporate partners for verification of biodiversity improvement and carbon sequestration, as opposed to carbon credits. So we are starting with one woodland, and this is the flow of the activity. And then we hope eventually to have this one woodland certified and then encourage other woodland owners, also members, to become FSC Ecosystem Services certified as part of this project. And that also links into a group scheme that I'll talk about in a couple of minutes' time. So to engage members is this. We've had a lot of events. And we're working with Amy Willocks from FSC UK to help us deliver this project, which hopefully will be the first in the UK. There's a lot across Europe and further afield, but there's none in the UK yet. And this is our first, just a brief overview of the woodland that we're looking at, which is quite a small woodland. And a lot of our members do have small woodlands. They range from about 2 hectares up to around 10 hectares generally. And we've got around about 35,000 hectares in our membership of woodland. And that's generally mixed woodland sites. Another of our projects is looking at biochar production and ash dieback. As with, you've probably got the same. We've got ash dieback is swooping across the UK, and a lot of our members have ash in their woodlands, and we're supporting them in ways of getting some benefit from having the extraction, having to extract ash by looking at how ash could be used in biochar production in using two methods, basically using charcoal retorts and producing biochar and the other method using pyrolysis, and we're looking at the feasibility and the economics of that. And then the next stage of the project will be looking at how that affects woodland soils when you reinstate it into your woodlands, or the economic benefit you can get from selling it on. And that leads me swiftly on to group schemes. So we're looking at 3 group schemes at the moment to help our members. One is a small firewood producer, one is Grown in Britain, which is a UK provenance scheme, and the other is an FSC, small woodland owner scheme. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about one of those, which is the firewood group scheme. The air quality regulations came into force in England early this year. From them, firewood producers that were producing more than 600 metre cubed were legally obliged to join the Ready to Burn scheme. Under 600 metre cubed, which is definitely what our small woodland owners fall into, don't have to comply till next year. But the scheme's really costly, and it's going to make it not. It wouldn't be worth them actually joining the scheme. It would be better. They'd be better off just stopping producing firewood. But then that also causes a problem because it reduces their income to help them manage their woodland. So we've been working with a number of stakeholders over the last 18 months to develop a small supplier group scheme, where we would, the main owner of the scheme is the certification body, and then we would be the group scheme manager, and we would have a number of clusters of small woodland members, which would bring the cost down considerably for those members and make it viable for them to actually be accredited and still get some income for their woodland. And that was a flying visit through what we do. If you've got any questions, please put them in the chat. And thank you very much for asking me to come along.
So thank you, Amanda. That was extremely inspirational in terms of the amount of things you do for your members. I got a good few ideas for our groups. Particular of interest, obviously, is the biochar project for ash dieback, which is really relevant to Ireland at the moment, where there's a huge problem with ash dieback. Thank you very much, and I'm sure you'll get some questions in the question and answer box. So, moving on to our second speaker. Our second speaker is Damien Francois. He's the technical director of Forets Bois de l'Est in France. And this is a particularly interesting one, I think, in terms of their membership. So I hope Damien does include some information on that in his talk. Forets Bois de l'Est is a French forest owner co-op with a very, very unusual membership structure, in my view. I hope that Damien has time to go through that for us. But anyway, just like Amanda, Damien is involved or was involved in the Simwood project, and in the same vein that we got to know him through IWP. So Damien, if you don't mind sharing your screen, off you go. Thank you very much.
Okay, I don't know if you see my screen.
Yes, we do, Damien.
Okay, so good evening to everybody. Sorry for my English because it's not my mother tongue, so I will try to do my best. I will give you a short view of the cooperative movement in France in order to explain you how does it work and which is our organization. So the forest in French is really important. In fact, the forest cover a quarter of the national territory, and the main part of the forest in France is private. Okay, there is something like 3.5 millions of private forest owners in France. We have got very little private owner and more bigger. So during the 60s, during the 70s, we begin to create a little association of private forest owner. The impulse was given by the Chamber of Agriculture. Some of little associations were created, and year after years, this association become bigger and bigger and cover the entire territory. So I work for forest and wood from east, just in the east part of the France. Today, concerning my organization, there are 6,000 private forest owners, and we manage 80,000 hectares of forest. And in my company, we are 120 people. Our first job is to manage forest, and we mobilize every year 545,000 cubic meters. So, and for 32 million euros of shift d'affaires. So you have some number for all the French forestry cooperatives. All the French forestry cooperatives, it's 100,000 people, 2 million hectares of forest managed, and 7 million cubic meters per year. It's really important. For instance, it represents 30% of the harvest of the private forests and 20% of the national harvest. In fact, in forestry cooperative, we have 3 major activities: an activity of service, forest management, evaluation, expertise. We help the private owner to write some sustainable management documents. A lot of activity with geographic information systems. An important activity of estimation, reforestation. We have all the system of certification, PFC, FSC, and we have an important activity of research, development, and innovation. That's the activity, service activity. After that, another part of our activity is to collect, to sell, and to harvest the wood. In fact, we have a direct supply contract with sawmills, paper mills, and we realize all the harvesting operation for our private forest owner. And another activity is all the silvicultural activity concerning the plantation. On this slide, you can see the organization of the forest in France. And I say to you, 15 millions of hectares of forest in France. A part of these forests are public forests with the National Forest Office, and another part is private forest. And in private forest, cooperative are one of the main actors of the sector. And so we are just in the middle between the private forest owner and the industry. So that's a a good picture of the reason to be of the cooperative. We are stronger together. So it's really the spirit of the cooperative movement in France. In fact, people can work with a cooperative for different reasons. Some of them just need punctual help in order to manage the forest, and other people attend a global help to manage the forest. Concerning the classification of properties of cooperative members, you can see that there is an important diversity. Some private forest owners are little, less than 25 hectares, and some of them are more than 1,000 hectares. But the main part of the private owners which we work, they have less than 50 hectares of forest. We have an important activity of plantation because of with global climate changing. We have a lot more and more disease in forest, and we have the obligation to plant new species. And more and more species from each country. An important point in the sustainable management document. In France, it's an obligation to have a sustainable management document when you have more than 25 hectares. So it's an important part of the cooperative to help people to write this sustainable management document. You can see an important part of our activity is the mobilization of the wood, and we organize all the harvesting operation. We buy the wood, we cut the wood, and we organize all the commercialization to sell the right product to the right customer with the minimum of people between the private forest owner and the sawmills. And you see that the global cubic meters increase every year, and it's an example of the capacity of organization of the cooperative. Okay, so if you have any question, I'm here for you, but this short presentation is just to try to explain you how we have worked to pass from small association to big cooperative.
Thank you, Damien. That was very enlightening. We have a long way to go in Ireland to catch up, I think. A few things that really struck me there was the general size of the forests in your cooperatives, the idea of having even 50 hectares of forestry in Ireland is considered a huge forest. However, that's the difference, perhaps. Yes, Damien?
An important point is that these structures are managed by the private forest owner and for the private forest owner. It's very, very important. These associations become bigger and bigger, but they have the necessity to give the proximity with the owner. It's a really important point.
Yes. I suspect you will get questions. Could I just say to all the attendees that if you want to ask a question, to stick it into the question and answer box, not the chat box, if possible, please. And I expect we will get plenty of questions for Damien. Thank you very much, Damien. Okay, I'm going to move us on now to our third speaker and final speaker for the night. I think you're probably most of you familiar with Liam Kelly. He's the Teagasc advisor for the Midlands. I think he covers about 5 counties in the Midlands. And Liam has been very instrumental, I would have to say, in encouraging and supporting the Irish Forest Owner Producer Group network. And so I have great pleasure in inviting him to talk about that and whatever else he wishes to talk about here tonight. So over to you, Liam.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Nicholas, and thanks for inviting me here tonight. As you just said, Liam Kelly is my name. I'm a Forest Development Officer. I'm based in Mullingar, and I'm just going to talk to you about the history of forest owner groups in Ireland and their development. I suppose just who were Teagasc in the background, forest ownership, timber supply, and how the forest owner groups were formulated, and their current status, and then we normally have an annual workshop for them each year as well. So just going to give you some background of that. I suppose Teagasc is the state agency providing research, advisory and education in agriculture, horticulture, food and rural development in Ireland. And we have an integrated approach between research, advisory and education. And from a forestry point of view, there's 8 advisors around the country. As Nicholas just said, I'm based in the Midlands, cover 5 counties here in the Midlands. And one of our main role is to support private forestry in Ireland. And that can be through visits, individual consultations, and also maybe just supporting the forest owner groups as well, and which we're here to talk about tonight. I suppose from a Teagasc point of view, our stakeholders are core to what we do, and forest owners in this situation will be very much part of our stakeholders. From a history point of view, I suppose 5 to 6,000 years ago, there was about 80% forest cover in Ireland. And as different settlers came into Ireland over the years and the country became inhabited, our forests reduced. And by the turn of the century or the 20th century, we had 1% forest cover. Now we've moved back up to 11% again. This has mainly been through, sorry, just bought a pointer here. This has been, initially land was bought by the state and planted up, and the area of forest cover increased. But from the mid-80s or so onwards, with the introduction of various supports and incentives, the private forest sector developed quite substantially. And this is the red area here. And most land that's being planted nowadays is being planted by individual private landowners. So you can see at this stage, since 1980 or so, there's been 280,000 hectares granted in Ireland. So that's quite a substantial area. That's owned mainly by the private sector. And you can see in the mid-90s or so, planting was quite substantial. And a lot of that then started to come towards production towards the end of maybe the 2009, 2010 or so. And it was around that time that we looked at developing forest owner groups. So you can see from the map here, there's a lot of forestry spread all around the country. And at this stage, the forest cover is up to 11%. When I was in college in the late 80s, early 90s, there was about 7% forest cover. So at this stage, so in the last 30 years or so, we have planted over 4% of the country has been converted to forestry. This represents about 23,000 private landowners with over 389,000 hectares in total. So that's quite a substantial area, which will start to come into production, or a lot of it in the production stage at this stage. About 70% or so, or 71% or so, of that is conifers, and 29% or so is broadleaves. And about 3/4 of our whole estate is under 30 years of age. So there's quite a lot of forestry coming into the productive state over the next number of years. The private sector at this stage accounts for about 49% of the overall total of forestry in the country. Forestry supports about 2.3 billion to the exchequer each year, so it's quite a substantial cause to the country at this stage. It supports about 12,000 jobs, and most of those are in the rural area. And most of our forests have been well planted and are maintained sustainably. So therefore, there will be good ecosystem services being served by them going into the future. I suppose just from a timber production point of view, the main production would be from Quilcha, the semi-state body, and they would be producing about 3 million or just less than 3 million cubic tons of timber per annum, and that will remain fairly static as time goes forward. But the main growth area over the next number of years will be the private sector, and this is going to grow from about 1.5 million. And it's reckoned that in about 4 or 5 years' time, we'll actually the private sector will actually be the amount of timber to produce on an annual basis will surpass the state production. So it is important that forests are managed and that this timber does come to market, and that the owners, etc., will get the benefit from it. So that was one of the reasons, I suppose, why forest owner groups were developed. Unlike some of my previous speakers, we have the forest sector in Ireland is only developing, so there wouldn't be a real forest culture there. So groups, we found that groups work well in agricultural enterprises, and again, you can see there's a strong history of groups in Europe. Again, power in numbers, mutual support and learning, and they can improve the management, environmental and economic outcomes from forests as well. So that's why we thought forest owner groups would be important. I suppose the initial groups in Ireland started in 2008. I think the first one was in Donegal. The majority didn't form between 2009 and 2011. And this is around the time that some of the larger plantations were starting to come into fruition, that they were coming towards the thinning stage. And we felt that forest owner groups forest owners could work together and try and encourage one another to manage their woods, and timber would come from them. So Teagasc initially promoted and facilitated their development. I would have set up 5 groups, one in each county. I thought the county bounds was a good area to start with, and so each of us would have set up groups in their own catchments, and I suppose we would have tried to sell the idea of having an ethos and the benefits of forest owner groups. Generally, we would have brought numbers of people together, and from that we would see was there an interest, and a local committee maybe would be formed with good geographical spread. And again, Teagasc would have provided the meeting space because we had a good office network throughout the country. There would have been other involvement as well, such as the IFA, local leader groups, leader companies, local authorities and energy supply companies as well. And in my case, most times when we started up the groups, the first chairman was generally the local IFA forestry rep. Most of the groups would have started as a discussion group, generally with a committee and a constitution being put together. And then they would have held a lot of meetings and local forestry events as well. I suppose the main aims of the groups was to raise awareness and knowledge of good forest practice through probably education, training. They all had a common interest because most of the owners in the groups would have had forestry. That was one of the conditions, that they would have to have forest, and generally that the forest was of a certain age as well, generally 8-10 years plus. So that it was approaching a thinning stage that timber production would be coming from it. From the groups then, the more with the older forests maybe would be share experiences, and there was a certain amount of peer-to-peer learning, and therefore it would provide confidence to other growers to manage their plantations. So generally, the forest owner would have had a forest owner approach. And again, in lots of cases, good friendships and relationships have developed from being part of these groups. I suppose I would say a good committee with enthusiastic leaders and members are essential to the success of the groups. Apart from meetings, then the general knowledge transfer would be from field events, maybe visiting a local supplier chain. That could be a sawmill or maybe a local firewood producer. Again, there would have been a number of forest timber measurement courses. Also, some of the groups would have organised chainsaw training for some of their members. And they would have got funding towards or got locals to provide those training courses. Also, many of the groups got involved with the department's or the Forest Service knowledge transfer group funding groups, and this allowed groups put together groups of 20, and over 7 events would be able to attend and learn different aspects of forestry together. Initially, most of the groups would have set out as discussion groups, and Teagasc would be very much to the fore in facilitating those. But as the groups develop, and this was important that the group would develop, many of them become moved into a business type, and some of them became producer groups. More adopted a cooperative approach, and Teagasc was still there to facilitate them, but generally wants to become into the business end. The group itself was starting to lead itself. So there were a good sign to see the group progressing in that way. In 2012, we actually developed, put together a leaflet and on the various producer groups. At that stage, there was 26. You can see that they were spread around the country, more or less one per county. And they, at that stage, they would have been holding lots of meetings and lots of local events, and a few thousand forest owners would have attended the various events that each of the groups would be putting on. As time went on, some of the groups then joined together with maybe the adjoining group, and at this stage we have about 13 groups. Now, some groups did not succeed, but the vast majority of the groups are up and running and are quite active at this stage. I suppose as time went on, the groups had to adapt and be dynamic in order to survive. And these are some examples that I would have noted. The Irish wood producers were part of the known project, and that was facilitated by Teagasc and Leader. And even the then involved other groups such as the Limerick Tipperary Woodlands Owner Group. They had a Woodland Hardwood Focus Group. The Northeast Group and the Forest Owner Group, the Forest Owners Cooperative Society got involved in certification. The Leash Group carried out a number of feasibility studies, and even the local, to me now, West Meath Group is heavily involved in continuous cover. So these are all different aspects that kept the various groups going, and those are just some examples. One important aspect that I would be involved quite a bit with each year is that we would put together a forest owner group workshop each year for all the groups to attend. Sorry about that. The first group workshop was held in 2012. And the meeting was held in Roscommon. We normally would invite all the groups to send along a number of representatives to each workshop each year. We'd normally recommend at least 2 members would attend. The idea was that each of the groups would get to know one another, learn from one another, share their various experiences and issues. We generally would have a number of officials from the Forest Service attending the meeting as well, and maybe sometimes would have external industry speakers as well attending. Most of the meetings would have been held in the Tullamore office, Teagasc office in Tullamore, and they used to be face-to-face at one stage. God be good to those days. But in more recent times, the last 2 years, we've had to hold our workshop online. And I suppose one of the outcomes from the 2020 meeting was that 2 representative groups were formed to represent the various forest owner groups. And one of those Irish forest owner groups is presented this here tonight. So I think that was a good outcome. I think the forest owner groups are there to stay. I think they are an important part of the private forestry at this stage. I do hope that they will remain there. And they are they will need to change, like everyone else. They will have to be dynamic and ready for change as time goes on. But I do think they are an important part of the private forest industry. So that's all I'd like to say tonight. Just thank you for your attention, and those are some of the contact details for Teagasc. Thank you.
Okay, Liam, thank you very much. Again, very instructional, and you covered the history very well, I thought. It took me back.
Yeah.
Anyway, at this stage, with everybody's indulgence, we're going to show a little video clip, a video, 6-minute video, basically promoting forestry in Ireland and also promoting the producer group idea. And then after that, we'll take the questions. Okay. So could we have the video, please, Alan?
The trees, like, they're growing themselves. They don't be breaking out like the sheep. They're grand, like, you know. We used to keep a lot of sheep at the time, and we would grew a few spuds as well. There's marginal land we had for sheep, like, so we decided to plant it to use the premium to build up the potatoes, like, you know.
Well, at the time when I did it, I said to you, it was marginal land. It was suitable for grazing, but not for tillage. And I even remember at the time I had a local man who used to work for Coillte, and he said to me, "Brown, you'll make nothing out of that. You know, it's too fragmented." And here we are, you know, 18, 20 years on, and I'm on my second innings on some of it. You know, there's a nice income coming out of it.
Why? I had a dairy farm at the time, and I think the penny dropped, first of all, when my accountant said, in 10 years' time, do you expect to be out in the middle of the night calving cows? It got me thinking, and this was an out farm, so we decided that at least some of the land should be put into trees.
I was born into a small holding and on the edge of Portlaoise, and at some stage we became very restricted in what we could do, and in fact some of our land was compulsorily acquired, and at that stage I said, what am I going to do with the money that they're giving me for this land? So I can buy more farmland, which was an option, or I can buy other sort of land, and I bought forestry land.
Basically, my father planted the plantation back in 2003. He was a farmer stroke cattle dealer, and he got Parkinson's. He decided he was going to retire from farming, and forestry seemed to be the ideal fit for him at the time. Now, with hindsight, a lot of our neighbours have planted around us.
In my father's time, there were no premia, and there was no grant either, that I can remember. It was just you made money out of the wood, you know. So I'm on second rotation in some of the farm at the moment.
I have plantations now that I have taken 4 tinnings out of at this stage, and really good stuff, top end forestry, if you like. But I mean, it blows everything in farming, apart from dairying, completely out of the water in what it does.
But it was good that the premium was there to help us along, like, you know, to get you a leg up on, and we were able to do the loans when the premium was coming out, so that went straight into that there. Just give you that leg up then, that you were on a different level.
And at the present moment, I have a harvester on site. We're doing the first tinnings and second tinnings on some of the other plots. I mean, go back 3 years ago, there wasn't that big a return out of tinnings, pallet wood, sawlog, but now there is.
So I actually did some of the thinning myself, and then I had the timber, and then I was like, well, what am I going to do with it? So just to kind of, I suppose, make the most out of what we had, I set up a firewood business, and it's been growing steadily, you know, year on year. So that's all the hardwoods now. We've just thinned them again. So I've got more timber down in the yard, and yeah, it's a small business, don't get me wrong, but it's growing, and it's enough to give me enough money to keep me here. And you know, that's really the objective of this, was that I can stay and live in rural Ireland and live in the local community. So that's the forest is allowing me to do that.
And it's funny, when we have people over visiting us, they always say, can we go down to see the forest? They never say, can we go out and see the sheep? you know, because they see the sheep in the field every year. So they go down to see the forest and they love it. So definitely as a thing to pass on from generation to generation, I think it's a fantastic, and apart from the tax benefits, I think to have an emotional attachment to something is great.
Very happy, very happy. I mean, I've this girl looking after me as well as a result.
Well, you'd be very vulnerable. Like, you'd be relying on some of the other forestry companies, and we tell you what the price is, and you'd be kind of hearing, oh, price of timber at roadside, no, maybe it's worth this, it's worth that. At least now we're out there, and as a producer group, we're a maker of a price instead of a taker.
All around the country there are producer groups. There are 9 in our umbrella producer group called Irish Forest Owners. They stretch from Donegal to Louth to Wexford.
It's almost like standing at the ring in a cattle mart. You get to hear what's going on, who's who, what's what, who to deal with, who not to deal with, what Johnny is doing up the road and how he got on. It's a good forum for knowledge and information, and for, in a way, for problem solving. And I find it as well, it's a safe space.
And it's only when we joined the group that we actually discovered that there's loads of people like us, that we're all first generation foresters. We're all out there and our knowledge level was all very similar.
It was great, like, because like I say, I knew nothing about trees. I mean, I knew plenty about spuds and sheep and that, but nothing about trees. Like, so you're with people and we're going to field days and that there, so you're learning, like, you know.
I would be actively involved in what's going on, if that's what you're asking me. It wouldn't be much good now to chainsaw.
I would encourage everyone to go walk in their woods and just bring along, a little saw or something with them, and you can just prune as you go along, and then you get to know your woods as well. I think that's a really important thing, is to know your woods, know what's here.
Okay, thank you for indulging us over that small video, but it does show where we've come from, if you like. Now, we had a few questions during the speakers talking, so I'd like to take a couple of those. Some of them I know have already been answered, but there are 1 or 2 that I'd like to be, if you like, answered in the open fashion live. So the first question is for Amanda, and it is, what is the compliance cost for firewood sales by your group?
That's going to, we're in the pilot stage at the moment, and the cost is going to vary depending on the size of the producer, so the volume that they're producing. So we've got a really full range, producing from around about just a couple of metre cubed a year all the way up to coming up to close to the 600 metre cube. So we think the starting costs for very small producers have to be proportional. So the costs will be not much more than their membership costs for those that are just producing a few ton a year. So we think ranging from around about £30 to £100, depending on the size of the producer, and the cost of applying to the ready to burn scheme as it stands directly, I think is around about upwards of £300-400, an average of between a 5 and 1,000 plus, depending on the size of the producer. So we're looking at proposing a really significant discount on the costs. And it will depend on the risk level as well. So the more they're producing, obviously slightly higher risk, so the more the cost. But we think between 30 and 100.
Thank you for that. Okay. There were a couple of questions which I know were answered online, but I think they're probably bear repeating. So I think Andrew it was who asked whether there was pressure to basically go to continuous cover forestry or to mixed species forestry in France. So if Damien wouldn't mind having a shot at answering that in live. I know he has already answered it to Andrew, but I think it's a very important question given the current situation in Ireland where continuous cover forestry is being pushed very strongly, but may in fact not be commercially viable. Damien, could you possibly take that?
Yes, I will try to answer this question. What I explain on the chat is sometimes it's difficult for the private owner to plant tree because today most of the citizens have idea about what is a forest, what is not a forest, what is a local tree, what is not a local tree, and sometimes private owners have got difficulties to choose the trees they want to plant. We help them say, okay, to plant a tree, it's good for the industry, it's good for the climate, but for some people, plantation is not forest. So it's a part of the difficulty, and we have to make a lot of communication towards citizens in order to explain what is good to plant a tree.
Okay. There was another question which maybe you might try and answer as well. It came in regarding startup costs. Maybe either of you or both of you could give your opinion on it. The idea of a grant to set up a cooperative or group. Did you get any support, or is there support in your country for the setting up of producer groups?
At the beginning, the first forester who work for the association of private owner, they work for Chamber of Agriculture. So it was free for the forest owner. Okay, they have help for free. But after that, the cooperative organized, and the service is paid by the forest owner.
Yes.
We have some help. For instance, it's help concerning the fiscality. We have fiscal advantages. Okay, for the people who are in cooperative, they have more help on more fiscal advantages than forest owner who stay alone. There is an incitation, an impulse to convince people to work together, because in France, the most important problem of the private forest is the fragmentation. Okay.
Yes, fragmentation. Yes.
Fragmentation. So there are a lot of impulse in order to convince people to work together.
Okay. Right. Thank you. Amanda, would there have been any support grants in England to set up producer groups?
No, not at all. So our organisation started with just a few members joining and built up over time with that. And we manage now with membership fees and project funding fees to deliver projects. So, for example, our Woodland Biodiversity project is helping us support members to improve biodiversity. And we've got funding in there to help them carry out interventions on a sort of regional scale. So looking at like almost a shared forester type approach for little networks of woodland owners, bringing in contractors on a group scale to keep the costs down, but through project funding. So in terms of setting up the group, none at all, and there's still none.
Okay, thank you. It's an issue for us over here at the moment. Thank you. Okay, we are coming to the end of the webinar, so I want to thank sincerely both of our visiting speakers from abroad and also Liam from Ireland. You've all given really good service here tonight, and thank you so much for coming. I also need to thank Alex Kelly of Irish Wood Producers for organising this webinar series, and for our two techies, Chris and Alan of Crannóg Media, for hosting it. I hope you got something from it. I would encourage all of our attendees to look at the website and see the list of webinars for the future. But there are 9 more. Next week's one is on biomass potential. The full list is there on the website. So I want to thank everybody for attending tonight. I hope you got something positive from it. Thank you all very much, and good night.
Thank you.